Hello and welcome. My name is Dr. Jeremie, and today I'll be walking you through using the image analysis tool. We're going to be using content from grade 10, unit 2, specifically the scientific revolution. And our objectives today is to analyze an image of historical purpose. And by the end of this video, you should be able to use this tool for any image you come across, looking at it with a historical eye. So what does this tool look like? The tool has multiple parts. The first is to observe and to source. So what do you see? What information is provided in the title, citation, and context, and why might that be important? Step 2, we're going to look for inferences and our reasoning here. What do you think of this image? What connections can you make to a historical moment that maybe you've already studied? Step 3 will be an evaluation. We're going to really try to understand the image and understand how it's useful for us to really make sense of the historical moment. We're going to look at the purpose, perspective and bias, and reliability and limitations. There's also another version, and this is actually the version we're going to use, that really looks at the purpose, perspective, and bias. And we're going to also do step 4, where we look at, now that we've analyzed this image, what's the historical significance of it? Right, so we're going to use this image. Remember, you can use this for any image that you come across. And we're going to really try to figure out, how does this image represent advances in scientific thinking during the long 19th century? So if we're paying attention to this image, there are a couple of things for us to see. Remember, step 1, we need to observe and source. So what do we see in this image? Well, we see a scientist of some sort, or someone with he's holding a bird, and he looks like he's really like conducting the experiment here. We also see people watching him and reacting to his experiment as well. And we also see too, it's a nighttime setting. We see the moon. It's very like atmospheric, and it looks like a living room, possibly a well-to-do upper class family living room as well. And we're also, let's look at step 2, which is the making our inferences. What connections can we already make? Well, what's helpful for us is that we do have this context here. So we know that the title itself is An Experiment on a Bird in the Air Pump by Joseph Wright of Derby. And we also know that he was an English landscape and portrait painter in the mid to late 18th century. That tells us a lot. We're already seeing now this is during scientific revolution and also part of the industrial revolution as well. And we see he's English, and we know his occupation too. And what else do we see? Well, this was a traveling scientist, so we were correct here. And we're grounded once again with this idea of things from the scientific revolution from the 17th century. And what's also here is we get to know what his subject is, that there are inventions, but we're also looking at the human drama. So if we look back at the tool, we have seen already, this is what we saw, the traveling scientist conducting an experiment with a bird in an air pump. People were watching and reacting to the experiment. And we also have that atmosphere of a nighttime setting in possibly a living room. And through the context especially, we knew that this was a period of experimentation, and scientists would conduct experiments and create innovations that often would shock and awe, especially if we looked at some of the expressions on the people's faces. And we also know that innovations created during the scientific revolution would push the boundaries of what people already knew. So now let's look at step 3. And let's go back to this image again. When we're looking for perspective, we're trying to really figure out, well, what are we supposed to focus on? What is the artist focusing on? What grabs our attention here? And the best way to do that is to look at the objects, look at potentially the figures you might see, and maybe anything else. Maybe there are no figures and it's a landscape. What do we see and how are we supposed to engage with this image? Well, when I look at this again, I really am focusing first on the scientist and what he's doing. So there's definitely an experiment happening. But then I'm also going to look at these people. There's so many people and they're doing a lot of things. We have potentially a courtship happening. We have someone avidly watching. We have the young boy who's helping with the experiment. We have also a thinker here. But then I also notice there's these two girls really reacting, horrified even by this experiment. So the artist really wants us to see not only the objects here, but like there's emotion, there's the human drama that was mentioned in this context. So I want us to really pay attention to things like that when we are looking at perspective. So what wrote was that while the bird is the focus of the experiment, and that's where our eye goes to first, the artist really pays a lot of attention to the humans in this painting and what they're doing, and also what they're feeling. If we remember what those girls look like they were feeling. So now that we know the perspective and what we should be looking at, why did the artist create this? What is behind this painting? Well, let's look at it again. And you will do this. You will go back and forth between writing and looking at the image. It's the best way to really get a good, detailed, and nuanced observation. So when we're thinking with purpose, why did the artist create this image? What message is he trying to send to his audience? Well, we looked at these individuals, but let's also pay attention to our context. If you have context, it's there for a reason and it's there to help you. And the context here really helps us out. It says that the artist's subject is not scientific invention, even though we do see it here. No, the subject is the human drama. It's the humanity going on. And definitely even the emotions going on while this experiment is going. So when I see this image, I think that the artist is trying to portray the human side of experimentation, the human side of science, that it's not just cut and dry, but there's a lot going on from the social atmosphere to the curious onlookers and even the children looking horrified. Experimentation and science is not just cut and dry. There's so much going on and it's a human endeavor. So what could be proving his bias towards that? Well, let's go back to the image once more. If we go back to the image, we definitely see this drama, right? But if we also look at the context and if we think about what we know is happening during this time period, we know that he's from England, so he's like right deep in the Industrial Revolution. He's seen the fruits of scientific revolution. He's also seen the what happens and the consequences of industrialization. So he's seeing these things happen. And if we want to try to figure out, well, why is this artist thinking the way he is, and how is he portraying what he's living through? That's something for us to think of, that he's going through the Industrial Revolution. He knows that it's not just about the science, it's about the impact of humans as well. So I would definitely, if you have the ability, when you have your image, do the highlights, figure out where is he from? How can that really impact why he's doing it? What does he do as well? And he's a landscape and portrait painter. So landscapes, he's used to atmospheric environments. Portraits, he can really capture the detail of human expression. So that really shapes too, like how he's presenting his work. But then where he's living in is also going to be really important to shaping what he's creating. So and when I think about the bias in this painting, is that it was made in the 1800s, and the artist not only saw the impact of the scientific revolution on society and on people, but he's seeing the impact of the industrial revolution, and he's seeing how some people are curious and they want to know more, but then some people are horrified and being really affected by everything that they're seeing. So if we are going to now take these steps and synthesize them, we're going to try to figure out the historical significance. And for us, for step 4, it's how does the image help us understand the historical question of how does this image represent advances in scientific thinking during the long 19th century? Well, we take everything that we did in the other steps and put it together. My thinking and what I wrote was that Joseph Wright's of Derby's An Experiment on a Bird in the Air Pump represents advances in scientific thinking during the long 19th century because it depicts experimentation and innovations such as the air pump. This image illustrates the human aspect and intellectual curiosity of the scientific revolution, even when experiments might be horrifying to some. You could have come up with many different answers to this question. And a lot of it is up to you about your rationale and what you took from the image. I hope this was helpful for you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.